Whew. Hi there. This is Noveljutsu, and I'm your host, Raelyn. Last time, we took a look at a few practices you can adopt to help you encourage creativity and manage inspiration. Today, I'm going to dive into some of the places that I've gotten ideas for the characters or plots in my novels, and maybe one of these sources will end up being a goldmine of ideas for you too. Characters are the heart of stories, so it should be no surprise that many people first think up a character they love before doing anything else. I think I've heard before that J.K. Rowling first envisioned her young Harry Potter sitting across from her on a train, and however her reputation may have fallen more recently, her books are still among the most successful novels ever. Take a look at characters from books, movies, or games you enjoy. If you've found a character you really love, instead of taking that character and writing fan fiction for them, try to define exactly what it is that draws you to that character. It might not be what you think it is. People love that magical world J.K. Rowling created, and it's part of why her novels have been so successful. But people who love Hermione Granger don't usually love her because she's a witch. Many love her because she's intelligent and has a strong moral compass. People don't love Samwise Gamgee from The Lord of the Rings because he's 3 feet tall with hairy feet. No, it's definitely not because of the hairy feet. They love him for his loyalty. What exactly makes you love your favorite characters? Why not use that quality as a defining characteristic of a new character of your own? Give this new character their own backstory, dreams, and voice, then put them in a world and a plot where that trait is going to be both tested and polished until it shines. Look at Samwise Gamgee again. His loyalty to Frodo is frequently being tested. As he follows Frodo to Mordor, Sam gets dirty, hungry, and annoyed by Gollum. His life is constantly in danger, and this journey to Mount Doom isn't even Sam's quest. To top it all off, Frodo's strengths, both his physical strength and his ability to resist the powers of the ring, keep waning. As Frodo is affected by the ring and by Gollum's manipulations, he becomes less and less the kind of person who inspires loyalty. It's almost too much for Sam. He almost gives up. But in the end, he shows the strength of his loyalty by returning to Frodo's side under great peril, and he helps Frodo finish his quest when even Frodo had given up. Once you have an idea for a character you like, allow yourself some time to get to know them. Imagine what kind of world they would live in and what kind of trouble they might get themselves into. Beginning your story with an interesting character and fanning out from there can help you decide on the best setting and plot to tell their story. Characters may be the heart of a story, but a story needs more than heart to survive, and there's no reason you have to start with characters first. Why not start with a cool setting? Often, people who write fantasy or science fiction can spend weeks, months, or even years creating new worlds. But even if your story is set in a real place on Earth, you can still get story ideas from it. Think about the places you've been to, seen, or heard of that you find interesting, and let your mind wander. Maybe you think about the Paris catacombs. Do you ever wonder if someone's gotten lost down there? What do you think they found? If you're into murder mysteries, maybe you imagine they find a fresh body someone tried to hide among the bones. Or, if you write science fiction, maybe your character discovers an entire hall made up of the skulls of alien soldiers from a failed invasion that never got recorded in the history books. Who covered it up and why? Don't want to write about a place on Earth? Earth can still give you inspiration. Search YouTube for videos about rare natural phenomena like the lightning storms over the Catatumbo River. Do a Google image search to find bizarre and beautiful places. What if those places were the norm on your world? How would that affect the people living there? How would it affect technology, culture, and the social structure, politics, and economics of this place? You could try drawing a map. This is a particularly good exercise for fantasy and for some science fiction writers, but it might be worth trying even if you're inventing a place to exist in the real world. It doesn't matter if you don't draw well, and it doesn't matter if you don't have a complete picture in your head of what you're trying to draw. Just start doodling. Now, take a look at your map. Where are the natural borders between nations, or, if your map is smaller scale, between districts or households? Is there anything you drew that doesn't make sense, like mountain ranges in formations that would never occur naturally? Maybe those mountains didn't evolve but were built by merfolk in a time when the land was under the sea. Is there a smudge on your coastline? Maybe parts of the land were lost to the sea in an earthquake. Where are the natural points of conflict in your map? If you have an oasis in the middle of a vast desert, there are probably people fighting over control of it. What happens to a boy who accidentally breaks a jug of precious water? What if this oasis is drying up because of people hoping to make a profit off a water shortage? Take a closer look at your setting, because it can suggest likely plots and characters that'll fit naturally into that environment. Music is storytelling all on its own and has been used to share culture, history, and imagination pretty much for forever. Music has a profound impact on our mood and emotions, and it can have a profound impact on your writing as well. Lots of people find inspiration from music. Some people can't write without it. Personally, I can't write with music because it distracts me too easily, but I still get inspired by music before I start my writing. Music not only can help you get the feel of certain scenes or characters, but it can also help you to come up with an idea for your novel in the first place. I have actually come up with a number of story ideas because I misheard lyrics from a song. So if you find music inspiring, let it carry your mind away with the possibilities. When I say stealing, I'm not telling you to actually steal another person's work. Don't do that. It's bad. But if you're interested in writing, you probably know how inspiring other books can be, and you can use that inspiration. The trick is not to plagiarize an entire story that belongs to someone else, but, just like I mentioned with characters, try to discover the core element of that story that hooks you, and write your own story based on that. Did you enjoy the Twilight series? So did E.L. James. By now, many people know that her 50 Shades of Grey series started out as Twilight fanfiction, but ultimately the two stories are pretty different. And Tomi Adeyemi has been pretty open about how Avatar: The Last Airbender was a huge inspiration for her Children of Blood and Bone. It's okay to take inspiration from other books, movies, and video games, or what have you. Just find a way to put your own spin on it. If you aren't careful with this one, it can backfire, but it can also breathe new life into tired stories. Try taking a story archetype or trope you like and put it in a genre it isn't often found in. Try setting it in a new time and place, or cast a completely different character in the lead role. Take a look at people who write retellings as an example. Beauty and the Beast has been rewritten so many times it might be hard to find a new angle to approach it, but there are lots of fairy tales, myths, and classic tales left to be reimagined. A word of warning. You may think that mashing two genres together will make your book even more popular because fans of two genres will be drawn to your book now. But the truth is often, rather than making your fan base bigger, you actually make it smaller. Fans of one of the genres you use might not be fans of the other, and if you're looking to get traditionally published, mixing genres can sometimes mean it's harder to find an agent who will want to represent you. But that doesn't mean that you can't have fun mixing genres and create something wonderful. You just have to be aware that mixing genres willy-nilly can sometimes close more doors than it opens. I feel like this point is kind of implied in all the entries before, but it's worth pointing out. At the risk of sounding like an inspirational poster, let life inspire you. Be a creeper and observe the people around you. Pick up a science magazine. If you ride the bus, instead of tuning out on your commute, pay attention to the crowd around you. There has been some really weird things that have happened when I've taken the bus. As long as it doesn't get too weird, go ahead and let those things happen to you too. I already mentioned looking up videos on YouTube about strange phenomena on Earth, but there are also tons of videos about notorious outlaws, or evil dictators, or rare psychological disorders that you never knew existed. Try subscribing to list or documentary channels. Get interested in this world because I promise you there are amazing news stories to find out there. Now that we've discussed several ways to come up with an idea, we can finally get started on Project Noveljutsu. From this episode onward, I'll share the workings of one of my own novels and bring you along for the ride. Now, sharing my novel here is a risk for me for a number of reasons, not least of which being that I'm not a perfect writer. There may be several topics I discuss on this channel that may not be my strengths as an author, even if I can recognize examples of other writers who do them well. I may fail to pull off some of the very things I talk about. I'm still learning, but my hope is you'll be able to learn alongside me, whether you learn from my successes or from my failures. Just hopefully not too many of my failures. Another reason this is a risky move is that sharing my novel so openly on this channel is a great way to guarantee it never gets published. At least not traditionally. Which is why I've chosen one of my older story ideas for Project Noveljutsu. It's one that has already seen a form of publication, I guess, though not as a novel, and it's a story that might be a little more prone to some tropey writing, but it's also one of my broadest stories that I have. By that, I mean it's the one novel I have that is going to be applicable to the most topics that I intend to cover when we eventually get there. Topics like inventing your own cultures and languages, for example. To give a little background, I originally had the idea for this novel back in high school. I'd planned to write an epic fantasy novel about a pantheon of gods who were at war. These gods would lend their powers to their human subjects, who would then be forced to carry out the gods' war in the human realm, unable to defy the will of their Patreon god once that god's power was bestowed upon them. I'd worked out the pantheon of gods, dividing their powers into factions that had natural opposites and allies, but I decided that one of those gods, one with powers more dangerous in the human realm than any other, would have acted neutral in the war while at the same time secretly choosing human champions to carry out her wishes. The story would then follow her first human champion and a few other characters who discovered him, this young man with strange capabilities they couldn't neatly fit into any known faction. They don't know if they can trust him. They don't know what side of the war he's on. He isn't even sure what side of the war he's on until he's too intertwined to free himself. But I never got around to writing this story. When I got older and started thinking about making my very first webcomic, I adapted this idea to a more contemporary fantasy, and I greatly simplified the story in order to make it fit into the number of volumes I wanted. I got rid of the gods entirely because I just simply didn't have enough pages to devote to explaining who they were or their relationship with mankind. Instead, I made people's magical abilities random rather than belonging to a set number of factions, and I created a secret agency that sought to uncover people with dangerous abilities and eradicate them before they could unbalance the delicate status quo. But that original epic fantasy version of the story I'd had in my head never quite went away, even after I'd completed making the webcomic version. So the story I'm going to use for Project Noveljutsu is yet another adaptation I worked on years ago, because apparently I just can't put this to rest. I readapted this story for a fantasy novel once again, but though the underlying story of a young man struggling and fearing a power he can't understand hasn't changed, this new version will be a bit different and hopefully more improved from both versions that came before. Stay tuned for future episodes to see how this story evolves. Do you have a way that you normally come up with ideas? Great! But for this challenge, I want you to try using a method you don't normally use. If you usually start with an interesting character, this time try drawing a map or using a line from a song as a theme for your story. Try and come up with 3 potential story ideas from that method. If you feel like sharing, you can post your ideas down below, or you can hop on over to my blog and post them there. Feeling protective of your ideas? That's totally fine. Why don't you tell us instead how you like to brainstorm? Is there something you do that's not on this list? Go ahead and tell us what it is. If you found this information interesting or helpful, go ahead and like, subscribe, and ring that bell to get more Noveljutsu content. Links to my website and to all my social media are in the description box below. See you next time!